I love the Friday the 13th franchise. I think each movie has something unique to offer, but like most fans, there are certain films in the series that I rewatch and appreciate more than others, so without wasting any more time, let's just go ahead and get to the ranking. Coming in at number 12 is Freddy vs. Jason. Now, as I mentioned in my Nightmare on Elm Street ranking, whenever you're ranking Freddy or Jason, I think it's essential that you include this film. Not only because the movie portrays both characters, but because it attempts to represent both franchises at the same time. And in my opinion, it drops the ball at both ends of the field. Now, don't get me wrong, I love the film for what it is, but it sort of turns Jason into a warped anti-hero of sorts and makes him less of a determined apex predator and more of a mindless puppet. You can't fundamentally change something about a character like Jason Voorhees when you're 11 films deep in a horror franchise. I do enjoy the movie, but in the end, I always end up thinking more about how great the film could be and not how good it actually is. That's why it's at the bottom of the barrel for me. Number 11 on my list is Jason X. I think I watched this movie maybe 20 to 30 times over the course of summer vacation when I was 12. It's cheesy and stupid, but so much fun at the same time. I love the sort of sci-fi TV production quality we get here, almost like Jason was dropped into an episode of Star Trek or Doctor Who. The film isn't trying to be the best in the franchise. It was really just a placeholder to buy the studio some time and allow them to get their shit together to make Freddy vs. Jason. They say the best way to kill a movie franchise is to send them to space. Jason X didn't necessarily kill the Friday the 13th franchise, but I don't think it really helped it much either. It's mindless, it's schlocky, and overall, it's just a bad movie. But I still rewatch it here and there, just not nearly as much as the others on this list. Coming in at number 10 is the Friday the 13th remake. Now, I think there's a lot of great stuff going on in this film. Derek Mears is ghoulish and menacing in a way no other Jason actor has been before. I just have to admit it, I don't think a single one of the side characters can act their way out of a wet paper bag. Even Jared Padalecki can't get it right here, which pains me to admit, because I'm an old school Supernatural fan. This film is just way too horned up and it's coursing with frat house flip cup energy. I think the film is fun overall, it just feels like it was made by a bunch of drooling gooners. Jason Goes to Hell used to be at the bottom of my list, but over the years, its charm has really bloomed for me. I'm not a huge fan of how we don't get much traditional Jason in the film, but I can't help but admire the courage in taking such a beloved franchise and unapologetically flipping it on its head. The gore and the kills are brutal and gooey in real Friday the 13th fashion, but they have that new line tinge to them this time around. When the house that Freddy built makes a Jason Voorhees movie, it's not going to be another Paramount project. Say what you want about Jason Goes to Hell, but the film is completely confident in its identity. I don't rewatch it as much as many of the films on this list, but recently I've snuck it into my rotation more than ever before. I love the film, but I do understand why some fans pass on it. This placement on the list might get me stabbed, but coming in at number 8 is the original Friday the 13th. Now don't get me wrong, I really do love the original film. I rewatch it once a year at least. I love the atmosphere, the music, the careful pacing. I think the acting is pretty well done, especially for the golden age of slashers. I don't have many negative things to say about it. The original just isn't what I'm searching for when it comes to the Friday the 13th franchise. I grew up watching Freddy, Jason, and Michael command the screen. These characters elevated their movies to something more than the traditional slasher. Friday the 13th doesn't have that sort of forward vision that the other films have. Despite being the first film in a wide-ranging franchise, it has more in common with one-off slashers than it does with its own sequels, and for that reason it's a bit lower on my list. I don't hate it or think it's bad, I just think it's missing a lot of what eventually made the franchise so great. Number 7 on the list is Friday the 13th Part 7, The New Blood. I love Jason's design, the whole waterlogged, soggy looking zombie drip works really well here. Kane Hodder does a great job giving Jason new life. He's not my favorite Jason actor, but I really appreciate the way he communicates Jason's rage. He's like a burly wrecking ball of a villain in Part 7. This is where Jason becomes an actual monster. Before he was somewhere between human and ghoul. He became an undead killer in Part 6, but 7 made him a twice, maybe even thrice dead being. With that being said, I do despise the completely hokey ending of this film. That horrible sequence with Tina's father just shits on everything Jason achieved beforehand. The end doesn't disqualify the movie in my eyes, but it definitely knocks it down a few spots. Friday the 13th Part 5 A New Beginning used to be at the bottom of my list, but it's actually moved up to the number 6 spot and it's become one of the most rewatchable movies in the franchise for me. I used to despise the fact that Jason wasn't really in the film. I thought it was cheap, stupid, and a waste of time. Flash forward to 2022, reviews for Halloween Halloween Ends are cutting the film to bits, but I'm one of the quiet minority who actually had a lot of fun watching it. After my second viewing of Halloween Ends, it clicked in my mind why so many people love Friday the 13th Part 5. I know Part 5 goes for a sort of Scooby-Doo-like trickery, but it does so with that very same Friday the 13th energy from the 4 films preceding it, only this time they really dial up the sleaze, the kills, and the sort of cheesy 80s tone. I love the look of Roy Burns' Jason, and even though I'm not a huge fan of Tommy in this sequel, I'm happy he shows up because it gives us the chance to get that great dream sequence in Corey Feldman's backyard. As I said before, I rewatch Part 5 way more often these days, and I'm not mad about it one bit. Coming in at number 5 is Friday the 13th Part 3, which is a movie that I know a lot of people have at number 1 on their ranking. I absolutely love Part 3. I think it has some of the best side characters and some legendary practical effects like Rick's flying eye and the axe stuck in Jason's dome. I have to admit though, I really don't think Chris is a good final girl at all. I don't buy her character for 1 minute. As far as female characters go, she's clearly the best one in the film, but when you're out here following the best final girl in Friday the 13th history, you really can't hold back one bit. This of course is the film where Jason gets his iconic hockey mask, and you can't forget about that amazing disco theme. Sure, the 3D gimmicks are literally shoved in our faces, but in the end I think that makes Part 3 stand out in a fun, charming sort of way. If my placement of the original film hasn't already doomed me, this one might be the spot that actually gets me crucified. At number 4, I have Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan. This movie is great. It's also pretty bad. The marketing for Part 8 pigeonholed the entire idea by creating off a title and a general concept rather than an actual script. If not for the guardrails of the Manhattan gimmick, a lot of the narrative choices throughout Part 8 would be entirely different. Still, even though the film seems pretty forced, I have a lot of fun with how ridiculous it is. Out of the 4 films that he's been in, I think this is Kane Hodder's best performance as Jason. Friday the 13th Part 8 is pure rock and roll. I don't really know why exactly. Maybe it's JJ shredding her flying V, or maybe it's the inclusion of one of the best rock songs ever featured in a horror film in Darkest Side of the Night by Metropolis. I know a lot of fans dislike Jason Takes Manhattan, but I don't really care. They can keep hating, and I'll remain in the trenches taking grenades alongside Part 8 until the very end. At number 3, I have Friday the 13th Part 6, Jason Lives. I know this one is at the top of a lot of people's lists, and I don't disagree with that at all. I get it. The movie rocks. It's a one-of-a-kind horror sequel, and it's batshit crazy in all the right ways. The film's self-awareness and unique humor came at a time when the franchise really needed something invigorating, and it's great that they really didn't have to fundamentally change anything to achieve it. The film might have the best group of side characters in the entire franchise, and also Tom Matthews is legendary as Tommy Jarvis. I always get a little bummed when I remember that this is really Tommy's last dance in the franchise. Can you imagine how cool it would be to get multiple films of Tommy Jarvis battling Jason Voorhees after the events of Part 6? I think that's a testament to the film overall. It leaves you wanting more in all the best ways. Like most big horror franchises, my number 1 and 2 often swap places. Right now I have Friday the 13th Part 4, The Final Chapter, at the number 2 spot. The Final Chapter is undoubtedly the best of the franchise, and I also happen to think it's the second best slasher film of all time behind John Carpenter's Halloween. Jason's at his best here. The kills are mean and the suspense is heavy. Corey Feldman's Tommy is the perfect protagonist too. Horror fans, we see ourselves in Tommy Jarvis. Let's be real here. Tommy's essentially a stand-in for every last one of us. What a great way to show respect to the fans. I expect nothing less from the great Joe Zito, who went on to direct multiple action epics after Friday the 13th Part 4. His action wisdom was alive here first. The physicality in Friday the 13th Part 4 is no joke. Jason actually feels scary here. Like Ted White's version might run you down and tear you limb from limb. I understand why it's a majority favorite, but I like one film in the franchise just a tiny bit more. My favorite Friday the 13th film is Friday the 13th Part 2. Part 2 was actually my introduction to the franchise, and since I watched it at such a young age, it really left a mark on me. I specifically remember the hammer to the skull scene being one that really made me squirm. I definitely rewatch Part 2 the most because of all the nostalgia, but also because Part 2 just moves at a breakneck pace. It wastes absolutely no time getting right back into the thick of it, and once it gets rolling, the film doesn't really slow down. Killing off Alice in the beginning is a bold move, but our new final girl Ginny is easily the best final girl of the franchise. No other actress holds a candle to the lovely Amy Steele. Part 2 really did well to establish the sort of mean-spirited attitude that rooted its way into the future films. The violence in Part 2 is bleak and absolutely indiscriminate. Nobody is safe in Friday the 13th Part 2. Also, we can't talk about Part 2 without without discussing the absolutely awesome, franchise-defining final act. Ginny using her wits to outsmart Jason in his mother's makeshift crypt is the stuff of horror legend. Sure, Part 1 established the Friday the 13th franchise as a slasher to remember, but it's this scene at the end of Part 2 that made Friday the 13th and Jason Voorhees titans of the horror genre. This is only further supported by Part 2's amazing jump scare ending, which in my opinion is a much better version of the original's final scare. Part 2 really does that a lot. It takes the great parts of the original film and just does them better and better time and time again. I love all the films in the Friday the 13th franchise, but today I love Part 2 the most. Thanks for watching if you made it this far. If you like horror movie content like this, consider leaving a like or subscribing to the channel. I've got some more horror videos on the horizon. I'm looking to speed up my production process and release long-form content a lot more frequently on this channel. Thanks a ton for watching, and until next time, stay safe out there.